Why China and USA clash over this insane project. More than 700 miles of undersea cables that transport the internet throughout the world are found in the ocean. In the midst of geopolitical tensions between the most powerful countries in the world, this vital infrastructure is at the center of a development race among the great IT giants. An undersea fiber optic internet cable network worth $500 million is apparently being developed by Chinese companies. The undersea network is being mapped out by China's three major carriers: China Telecom, China Mobile Limited, and China Unicom. The Hainan province of China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and France would all be connected by the proposed cable. The Europe Middle East Asia, or EMA project, which is being led by China, aims to directly compete with other cable that is currently being built by a U.S. company. According to reports, the U.S. has interfered in at least 6 private undersea cable negotiations in the Asia-Pacific region during the previous 4 years. The U.S. has stepped in, either by requesting that cable investors not hire Chinese contractors, or by requesting that U.S. IT companies reroute their cables to Taiwan and Singapore. The United States has likewise increased investment in digital infrastructure to counter China's expanding influence. According to experts, this was a warning indication that the cables that make up the worldwide internet backbone could split. Has the underwater internet cable network started to cause tension between the U.S. and China? Let's discuss in detail. The United States and China's great power game is now being played in the unlikeliest of places, over the unlikeliest of reasons. The two nations are today battling to gain supremacy in controlling global communications through the undersea fiber optic cables in their latest tech wars. State-owned telecom companies in China intend to build an undersea fiber optic network that will cost $500 million and compete with a project of similar nature in the United States. The plan is an indication that the internet's infrastructure could be damaged as a result of the escalating tech conflict between Beijing and Washington. Asia, the Middle East, and Europe would be connected via the EMA, or Europe Middle East Asia cable, that has been suggested. China's three major carriers, China Telecommunications Corporation, China Telecom, China Mobile Limited, and China United Network Communications Group Company Limited, China Unicom, according to 4 people with direct knowledge of the plan, are developing one of the most sophisticated and extensive subsea cable networks in the world. According to the 4 sources, the cable would connect Hong Kong to the Chinese province of Hainan on the island before going on to Singapore, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and France. The individuals want to remain anonymous because they were forbidden from talking about potential trade secrets. The estimated cost of finishing the cable is $500 million. The HMN Technology Company Limited in China would create and install the cable. Huawei Technologies Company Limited, a significant player in Chinese telecom, held the majority of the cable company's precursor business. People claim that in order to build the cable, HMN and Tech would receive subsidies from the Chinese government. Requests for response from Hengtan HMN Tech, China Mobile, China Telecom, and China Unicom went unanswered. Whether directly addressing the EMA cable project, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement that it has long supported Chinese businesses to engage in global investment and cooperation. Because of worries that Beijing would eavesdrop on internet traffic, Washington has successfully pushed a number of Chinese underwater cable projects outside over the past 4 years. The U.S. government additionally stopped the licensing of projects led by Google LLC, Meta Platforms Inc., and Amazon.com Incorporated that would have built private undersea cables to link the U.S. and the Chinese territory of Hong Kong. More than 95% of all international internet traffic is transported via undersea cables. For many years, a combination of telecom and tech corporations have held these high-speed connections. For data to travel effortlessly around the world, many organizations pool their resources to develop these massive networks. These cables can be spied on and damaged. These cables have been turned into political weapons in an ongoing dispute between China and the United States. The advanced technologies that could determine economic and military supremacy in the coming decades are the focus of the competition between the superpowers. The CME WE6 cable, which is now being built by American company Subcom LLC, is designed to compete directly with the China-led EMA project. Additionally, CME WE6 will link Singapore to France via Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and a half a dozen other nations along the route. The CME WE6 cable consortium first chose HMN and TAC to construct such connections. However, a successful U.S. government pressure campaign resulted in Subcom receiving the contract last year. The U.S. blitz included offering foreign telecom companies training subsidies worth millions of dollars in exchange for them picking Subcom versus HMN TAC. In December 2021, the U.S. Commerce Department also imposed sanctions on HMN and TAC. According to the penalties, the corporation planned to buy American technology to aid in the modernization of China's People's Liberation Army. That action made it impossible for owners of HMN-built cables to sell bandwidth to American tech firms, which are typically their biggest clients, undermining the project's viability. The Chinese government's ambitions to build its own undersea cable network have drawn criticism from the U.S. because they could give the Chinese government access to spy on or interfere with internet traffic. The Clean Network was a strategy put out by the Trump administration in 2020 to safeguard the country's vital technology and telecommunications infrastructure from unreliable foreign suppliers. To counter China's hegemony in the sector, the Clean Network plan includes a push for American IT companies to assist in the construction of new undersea cables. Additionally, the United States has exerted pressure on its allies, such as Australia and Japan, to forbid China telecom giant Huawei from taking part of the creation of their own undersea cable projects. China has recently aimed to strengthen its position in the global telecommunications sector with projects like the Belt and Road Plan, which entails the construction of additional undersea cables. China's strategy has drawn criticism from the United States, which claims that it takes unfair advantage of the market by using state subsidies and other methods. The U.S. and China's fight over underwater cables serves as a focal point for a larger tech conflict between the two nations, which has also involved disagreements over 5G networks, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. The growing hostilities between the U.S. and China over technological issues have alarmed some experts who fear that this could result in the development of two distinct, incompatible internets. The ability of nations to work together on problems like climate change and global health could suffer significantly from a so-called splinternet. This would also have a substantial impact on international trade and communications. New undersea cables being developed by China and the U.S. are but one front in a larger tech conflict between the two nations that isn't likely to end anytime soon. A fiber optic submarine cable that runs along the ocean floor most likely carried the bits and bytes that make up this video for you. These cables are a component of the network architecture that enables the global transmission of practically all internet traffic. And as the internet becomes more and more necessary for everyone and everything to function, it will be more important than ever to decide who owns, builds, and ultimately controls this network. Over the past 2 decades, adoption of the internet has grown steadily. Despite being developed in the late 1960s, the World Wide Web's invention in 1989, which revolutionized the way we communicate, led to the internet's widespread adoption. Prior to the development of mobile devices, the only practical means of accessing the internet was through pricey desktop computers. However, it is now an essential component of our lives. So, this is how it functions. When you send an email, tweet, or post a picture online, The data is transmitted to a router or cell phone tower via cables, or more frequently, radio waves. From there, these messages are transmitted as light pulses across a network of fiber optic connections to an internet exchange, which serves as a sorting office. In order to connect to other networks, most data from users in a local area network transist through these hubs. This route will probably travel along the seabed in order to reach networks and data centers on the other side of the globe. Before reaching a building, these submarine cables travel across the ocean in a crisscross pattern. The data travels over land once more from the landing location, which is where the underwater cables come to a stop. Although it takes great skill to lay a cable across an ocean, this has been done for more than 160 years and is not a new invention. When the cable is passed beneath the bows, the crew assumes control of it. The first transatlantic telegraph line was established between the United States and Great Britain in 1858, thanks to the development of widespread usage of the electronic telegraph, which could transmit messages in Morse code using dots and dashes. By the early 20th century, telephone technology had overtaken the telegraph as the dominant mode of communication, allowing voices to be transmitted across wires via electrical signals. Submarine cables were soon transporting telephone communications and were installed all over the world, primarily by telecom monopolies like the British Post Office and the American Telephone and Telegraph, or AT&T. International consortiums started investing in underwater cables at the same time as the dot-com bubble in the 1990s. Fiber optics covering 35 kilometers connect this single dealing room. These private businesses rented or sold the bandwidth to other businesses that required greater capacity. The network has grown quickly during the past 10 years in order to meet the demand for internet service. Some cables are rather short, like the 81-mile Celtics Connect cable that connects Ireland and the United Kingdom, while others, like the 12,427-mile Asia-America Gateway cable that crosses the Pacific Ocean, are much longer. These cables have fiber optic strands that can transmit data at rates of more than 100,000 miles per second and carry over 95% of global data. This is due to the fact that information can still be transmitted over great distances most quickly, most reliably, and affordably through undersea cables. The largest threat to undersea cables is human activity, even though the equipment on land and beneath the water is occasionally exposed to curious rodents or sharks. Internet service was knocked off for all of Armenia in 2011 after an old Georgian woman broke an underground cable while scavenging for copper, and 3 undersea internet cables were severed in 2016 by a ship dragging its anchor in the English Channel. But there are some situations where satellites are required to deliver the internet. Satellites are the favored choice since very remote places lack the population density to justify installing cables economically. Many nations' militaries and governments rely on satellites for security purposes. In order to beam the internet to remote regions of the world, Google's parent firm Alphabet has also set its sights on internet balloons. The web has expanded, but it has also become more condensed in other ways. Silicon Valley had a purpose to invest in these tactical assets because of the emergence of American technological giants in the 21st century. At the moment, more than half of the world's undersea bandwidth is owned or leased by content providers like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. By 2020, Google will have funded 16 cables that span the majority of the planet. Facebook will have invested in 12 cables that span both the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans, and Microsoft and Amazon will have each funded 5 cables. These connections are necessary to meet the demand for the tech giants' services, such as streaming and cloud computing, which have a low tolerance for delay and high bandwidth requirements as they build their global network of data centers. Governments are, however, closely monitoring the ownership of these underwater cables due to security issues. According to some observers, it is the newest front in the China and the United States' geopolitical conflict. Due to worries that Huawei, a Chinese technology corporation, may gain access to its networks. Australia blocked Huawei from installing a connection between Australia and the Solomon Islands in 2018. A U.S. national security group raised concerns in June about a Facebook and Google-built 8,000-mile cable that would link Hong Kong and the United States, claiming that it would provide unprecedented opportunities for Chinese government spying through intercepting internet data. Many analysts think that Huawei's expanding role in the installation and maintenance of submarine cables around the world could even give China the opportunity to sabotage international internet connections, mimicking tactics used during World War I. Then, with its control over the global telegraph network, the United Kingdom was able to sever almost all of Germany's connections to the outside world. Similar to this, the United States ran an undercover operation in the 1970s to intercept Russian submarine cables. In the case that a cable is broken, having numerous underwater cables covering the same path serves as a buffer. More cables won't necessarily make everyone's connectivity or internet speeds faster, though. The undersea cables, which carry the vast majority of the world's internet traffic, have become a key point of contention between the two global superpowers, as intelligence agencies can tap into the cables to carry out surveillance. Over 400 undersea cables carry over 95% of all international internet traffic globally, according to data from Telegeography, a Washington-based telecommunications research firm, as quoted by various reports. 2 communication cables linking Taiwan with its Matsu Islands were destroyed in February, cutting off the internet for 14,000 islanders. This opened up a new battleground in the current U.S.-China tech conflict, according to sources on March 8th. While Taiwan refrained from blaming Communist China because there was no concrete evidence that Chinese fishing boats or freighters were to blame, it expressed suspicion that they were to blame. As tensions continue to rise between the U.S. and China, the battles over undersea cables are likely to become even more intense. At the heart of the issue is that undersea cables are critical infrastructure for the internet. That's all. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and ring the bell icon to get more videos.